Hello. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to moderate this afternoon session, and a pleasure to welcome Dr. Maria Eugenia Ferrero from the Institute of Nivology, Glaciology, and Environmental Sciences from Argentina. Her research topic is wide. It focuses on hydroclimatic reconstructions along the tropics and subtropics, impacts of climate on ecosystems, long-term responses. And she's also promoting tree-ring science in South America. She's also a member of PAGE Scientific Steering Committee. So what a pleasure to have you here. And you will have 25 minutes for the talk and 5 minutes for question and answer. And to all our attendants online, please write your questions using the Q&A icon. You can see it on the screen, and enjoy the talk of tropical dendrochronology. Please share your screen, Maria, and introduce us your presentation. You are muted.
Thank you very much, Esther. Good afternoon, everyone. I will share my screen. Let me see. So I am sharing the right screen, Esther?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I can start. Okay, good afternoon again. As Esther said, I'm going to be presenting recent developments on tropical hydroclimate reconstructions in South America. And this is, of course, years of collaboration between several countries and a lot of colleagues from different countries, as I said. And if you please have any question, I will be pleased to answer them. So to begin with, South America has one of the largest tropical forests, the Amazon forest, along with the highest mountain chains in the inner tropic, the Andes. So they are really important because the Amazon sustain one of the major centers of deep atmospheric convection and heavy rainfall. But since the 90s, studies are documenting changes in precipitation, trends, and increases in extreme dry and wet events. So this is becoming of radical importance because both regions, the tropical Andes and the Amazon lowlands, sustain populations considered as low incomes. That means that they are below the poverty line. And where precipitation and rivers are vital for economic activities, agriculture, and cattle raising, that is mostly familiar or communal. So this population are highly vulnerable to the climate change and natural extreme events. Briefly, the summer circulation in tropical and subtropical South America depends on the summer monsoon system, which is responsible for the more or less for the 70% of the total rainfall during the summer months, the austral summer months, which are from October to April here. So during the onset of the summer season, the migration of the intertropical convergence zone brings humidity from the tropical Atlantic to the Amazon basin. From here, the moisture is transported by the low-level jets along the eastern slope of the Andes to the subtropical plains of northern Argentina and also southeastern South America. Another important component of the summer monsoon is the establishment of the Bolivian high which facilitates or brings moisture from the Amazon basin to the highlands of the Altiplano. So this general humidity cycle is quite well understood and more or less established in South America. Nevertheless, it is difficult to characterize the variability, the local variability in precipitation, mainly in the Andes because of the complex topography. So in this figure, you can see a sketch or scheme of the South America and the different forests and different regions I will be focusing. For instance, here you have the lowlands that are, for instance, the Chaco and the Chiquitano forests in South America, the eastern slope of the Andes, where the rainforest of Yungas developed, and finally, the high plateau of the Altiplano. Here you have climate station data from temperature and from precipitation. And you also see here each dot is an instrumental station, and you can see here how precipitation varies from the lowlands to the eastern slope of the Andes to the Altiplano. So you can see that in the lower region, precipitation is rather low and homogeneous, but then in the eastern slope of the Andes, it becomes greatly increased both in total amounts and variability. And finally, in the highlands of the Altiplano, precipitation lowers again to low values. So you can see that in different regions, there is the development of different forest types. For instance, in the Chiquitania and Chaco forest, we have dry seasonal forest. In the Yungas, as I say, rainforests, seasonal rainforests, and the Altiplano, very dry forest again. So again, this gradient produces a lot of local rainfall variability. And in this sense, it is also difficult to assess the different trends in precipitations along the tropical and subtropical South America. So there has been studies during the last years that tried to see or to study precipitation trends, and they're not very conclusive. Depends on the region, depends on the scale they are studying. So there are studies that say that in the Amazon basin, there is an increase in precipitation in the northern part, or a decrease in precipitation in the southern part, or the contrary, or no long-term trends. For the central and western part of the Amazon, there are also several studies that does not reveal any unidirectional trends for the 20th century, but other studies appears to say that there is a decreasing or increasing in precipitations in the 70s for some spots in the Peruvian, on the Amazon or the Bolivian Amazon region. Also for the Altiplano, the precipitation studies state the precipitation trends are weaker or show high variability due to the heterogeneity in this region. And lastly, in the southeastern South America, there is a general consensus that the precipitation has increased greatly for this last century for summer months. So again, the shortness and the scarcity of the rainfall records that are usually less than 50 years hampers the assessment of the range of natural hydroclimate variability and the evaluation of possible changes in precipitation. So as an alternative, we have the tree ring records that are one of the best paleoclimate proxies for reconstructed climate variability on multiple scales. Briefly, dendrochronology in South America has like 70 years. It's not like very old compared to the Northern Hemisphere, but it was not until the 90s that the first tropical chronologies started to develop in the tropical Andes of Argentina. So to these last decades, we have several tree ring chronologies developed from different species and in different regions. So all these chronologies, these tropical chronologies are sensitive to summer's precipitation, and then it is possible to make reconstruction of climate variation. So we will present the tree ring precipitation or hydroclimate reconstruction for these different regions with emphasis on climatic changes and extreme in the last decades. I will start with the southern Altiplano of Bolivia and Chile, where, as I showed you before, there is a region with very low amount of precipitation, highly dependent on summer rainfall, both for ecosystems and for local population economic sustain. So the only tree species that grows in the Altiplano is the Polylepis tarapacana, which is the highest elevation tree in the world and can live up to 100 years. It is very sensitive also to summer precipitation variations. So with these trees, Mariano Morales and colleague develops in 2012 the first precipitation reconstruction for the Bolivian and Chilean Altiplano. This precipitation reconstruction covered the last 700 years and shows a very nice interannual and multi-decadal variations, and also shows a steady drop in precipitation in the last decades. With these annual values, we are able to analyze the recurrence rates of both dry and wet events. And we can see here that for the last decades, there has been an increase in the recurrence of extreme dry events. These events are analyzed from the percentile 10 of variation, of variability. So you can see that very extreme events are becoming more recurrent during the last decade for the southern Altiplano. Complementarily, a new precipitation reconstruction has been developed in the northern part of the Altiplano, which is a paper that is being reviewed now in the Climate of the Past. This precipitation reconstruction also from Polylepis tarapacana that covered the last 400 years show a decrease in precipitation in the last decades and also an increase in extreme recurrence in the last decades. So for the Altiplano, there are other hydroclimatic reconstructions, and they are all consistent in this decrease in precipitation in recent decades. Also, these reconstructions show significant oscillatory modes that explain a large part of the variability in these reconstructions that are related to ENSO signals. It is well known that there is a strong relationship between ENSO events and precipitation over the Altiplano and for the instrumental record. So we see that for the Altiplano that there is a general decrease in precipitation and an increase of recurrence of dry events. But if we move to the eastern part of the Andes, to the lower part, the climatic story changes. I showed you before that the studies in the southeastern South America agree that there is an increase in precipitation, and more significantly during the last decades. So here it is an instrumental record from the Chaco Plains and the southern tropical Andes that shows this increase in precipitation from the 70s, and also a recurrence of extreme wet events during the last decades. These triangles are the percentile 95. So you can see that there is also an increase of very important of precipitation, positive precipitation trends. And this is important to know that this increase in precipitation has triggered large scale processes in the southern Andes, in the southern tropical Andes, such as landslide, rock slides, but also you can see these examples for the last years, but also heavy floodings in the lower part of the Chaco region. where you can see that this produces multiple damages to infrastructure and the isolation of the population. And for instance, this happened this year, and you can see how local population tried to mitigate or to cope with these heavy floodings. But also this increase in precipitation in this part of South America has allowed the expansion of the agriculture frontiers into the dry forest of the Chaco. And for instance, this biome has lost 40 million hectares since 1985, again, due to increasing precipitation, mainly to replace forests for soybean. And Argentina has been one of the countries with the highest rate of deforestation. And in case if you wonder, this is me some years ago in this Chaco region. Very sad situation. So we developed an hydroclimate reconstruction for the Bermejo River, which is a very important river in northern Argentina, which headwaters are in the tropical Andes of Argentina. And then it floods towards the Chaco region. So this reconstruction that covered the last 320 years show again high interannual and decadal variability, an increase in the wet events in the last decades, and also an increase in the recurrence of very extreme events, wet events for the last decades. And it is also very extraordinary in the context of this 300 years reconstruction. This reconstruction, this tree-ring reconstruction agrees with other independent reconstructions of hydroclimate variability from sediment records, for instance, in the Laguna Yema in the Chaco region of Argentina, and also a sediment record from Laguna Mar Chiquita that is in the Pampas of Argentina. Both records show that there has been an increase in hydrological variability from the 70s toward the present, and also agree with our tree-ring reconstruction. And if we move toward the lowlands of Bolivia, the history is rather the same. Lidio Lopez developed a precipitation reconstruction from this Chiquitania forest, the lowland forests that are located in the southwestern Amazon basin. And in this reconstruction, Lidio showed that there is also an increase in precipitation, an increase in the wet extreme events, and an increase in the recurrence again of extreme dry years along this 200-year reconstruction. So this is a pattern that is repeating in this tropical Andean area. If we compare both reconstructions from northwestern Argentina and southwestern Bolivia, we can see that there are some decadal modes that are repeating. The subdecadal mode, that is like from few years, 4 years in this case, is not very important in both reconstructions. And it is consistent with other instrumental studies that say that the subdecadal oscillation that might be related to ENSO signal are weaker in these Andean valleys. But decadal and multidecadal mode of variabilities are important components of the Andeans and lowland reconstructions, and they are apparently related to the Atlantic oscillation, to the Atlantic Ocean oscillations. There is also, this is very, very new, a tree-ring chronology that has been developing in the Madidi National Park in the northern part of Bolivia, which is like between the tropical Andes and the Amazon basin. And we can also see here in the tree-ring chronology that there is an increase during the last decades. This is very new data, and we have still to see and to analyze and to evaluate the relationships with climate. But we can see that at least in generally, there is a common responses of trees in this large area. If we move towards to the Andes, to the Yungas of Peru, we also developed precipitation reconstructions recently. This precipitation reconstruction comes from a forest in the upper basin of some Amazonian river, cover the last 200 years, and also show very nice decadal and interannual variability, and a decreased trend in precipitation in the last decades that coincide with, of course, instrumental and regional records. Also, we see in the precipitation reconstruction an increase of dry events in the last decades, but they also appear in the first part of the 19th century. But for the last decades, these dry events are becoming more frequent again. Again, this reconstruction show both subdecadal and multidecadal oscillatory modes that we relate in this area with ENSO events and Atlantic events with the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation at these longer scales. So with all these precipitation reconstructions, we can have now a more complete picture of the hydroclimate variations in the tropical Andes and the lowlands. So with the tree-ring reconstructions, we can see from from Chile, Bolivia, and Peru in the Altiplano, there is a general decrease in precipitation, an increase in the extreme dry events, and also a strong ENSO signal for the Altiplano. For the south tropical Andes of Argentina and the lowland area in Argentina, which is the Chaco, and lowland area in Bolivia, the Chiquitania, we also see that in general there is a general increase in precipitation since the 70s, an increase in extreme wet events, and a strong response to multidecadal oscillation. And lastly, in the tropical Andean Amazon forest or area here in Peru, there is a decrease in precipitation, a general decrease in precipitation, an increase in dry events, though not that extreme as in other periods, and both interannual ENSO events and multidecadal oscillation modes. So what is important to count on these tree-ring reconstructions? I was reading yesterday just this paper of Alice Grimm, who said that interdecadal variability is a substantial part of the summer precipitation variance over South America. So as I showed, there is a lack of long-term measurements of hydroclimate variability in the Andes and in the lower lands. So with these precipitation reconstructions that are like century long, we're able to explore decadal and multidecadal variation in precipitation in South America and the influence of both Pacific and tropical Atlantic Ocean on precipitation variability. And also, a very new paper of Kevin and Jason said that they are doing an assessment on temperature reconstructions, but they say that despite advances in the last 20 years, the tropic and the southern hemisphere remain underrepresented.
Maria, you have 1 minute to summarize.
Yeah, so there is pretty much uncertain on future climate and extreme in this region. That's why, and this is the last slide, we need to continue to develop tree-ring chronologies from different species and in different regions along tropical and subtropical biomes of South America. This is a picture of the chronologies that have been developed until now. There is, of course, an schematic figure, but you can see that both the lowlands and the tropical Andes and the southeastern South America are being completed with tree-ring chronologies. So all the development of these tree-ring chronologies will allow us to develop a new version of the South America Drought Atlas, the SADA, that actually is limited to the southern part of the South America, from the latitude 12 and below. So this is very important to complete all the picture. It is important also to develop another proxy from tree-ring as isotope chronologies will give a very important hydroclimate information. And finally, with all the reconstructions, the precipitation reconstructions, it will be possible to reconstruct in all the tropical South America the long-term climate variation in the Andes, in the Amazon basin, and the southeastern South America, and of course to know how is the summer monsoon dynamics at multiple scales. So thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, thank you, Maria, for this comprehensive presentation in 20 minutes and for showing us the potential, still I say potential of dendrochronology to really reconstruct climate history. And I'm sure there are so many applications in addition to climate reconstruction in terms of quantifying ecosystem services and its application in restoration and so many things. So I think before I ask a question, I will give the chance to stop sharing your screen, and yeah. If there is any question from the participants, I give a chance first to the audience. If not, I will have one question. I mean, also in Africa, we see this increasing trend of mostly in East Africa of drought events. We found that the extreme dry years increasing 2 to 3 years, and also related to El Niño. And but we didn't find any long-term trend. Mm-hmm. It's only this interannual variation. How is it in your region?
Yeah, we've been seeing that these long-term modes are mostly seen in the tropical area, not that much in the altiplano, because the altiplano is very sensitive and subjected to these west winds from the Pacific and hence from the events. But some years ago, I saw that there was a reconstruction, not from tree rings, but I think from a lake sediments from Africa, that they found multidecadal oscillations, also related to the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. They were antiphased. I mean, they saw like a decrease in the precipitation events, while we saw an increase in the precipitation events. But both seems to be linked to the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. So that's why I think it's very important now to put our eye to start trying to see those links and to try to understand more deeply the Atlantic influences on precipitation, because there also for the last year there was the ENSO, but because we lack of information that gave these tropical tree ring chronologies on other modus variability. So it's very important now to start digging on this other Atlantic mode of variability, not only the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, but also, you know, the South American convergence zone or the low-level jet. They also have long-term or decadal variations that we can explore with these three-ring chronologies.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was so clear for us, this remote ocean atmospheric interaction. So yeah, I don't know, is there any burning question from the audience? If not, I just, maybe we can still 1 or 2 minutes. So this tropical dendrochronology is really a new frontier, I would say. It is emerging, and there are new techniques, many species to really be studied. And which parameter do you see powerful? I mean, in terms of signal strengths, is it blue intensity? Do you try the trailing with the isotopes and the image analysis? What is?
Yeah.
Or a combination of all of that, or the wood anatomy? What is your experience on?
It is very interesting to keep exploring. Though the tropical dendrochronology and the species that we study, they, for instance, blue intensity is not, I don't think it's possible to apply to those species because of the anatomy of the wood. It's very complex. It's really very complex. But on the other hand, we can study other, for instance, coelom or good anatomy or vessel diameter to see they give another information on dry or wet events. As I said, isotopes, they give incredible information on hydroclimate variation, though it's very expensive, you know. But Roel Vrienen and Lai Andrew-Hiles are developing isotopes chronologies in South America, in the tropical South America. Roel has been working with isotope for some years now. And that's why it's important to keep exploring and to keep developing these chronologies. I mean, three-ring chronologies are the easiest and the cheaper proxies that we can get, and they have a lot of information. But of course, there's the possibility to explore a lot. It's a very new field, as you say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this really exciting presentation and potential. And I always say there are many things to explore in the tropics, and you know, so whoever is attending, you see the potential out there. So thank you so much. And I think we don't have much time to discuss. Yeah, thank you.